Welcome to the Tech Today podcast. It's your host, John Maeda. We published a piece about Gen AI a moment ago, and it was a very brief piece, and it just asked the question that Sam Altman, co-founder of OpenAI, he was publicly ruminating about prospective use cases for Gen AI earlier this week. So if he's sort of unsure, and granted, use cases take time to evolve, I get that. But at what point do the venture investors and the corporate investors grow weary of writing these massive checks for this LLM build, right? So that we're clearly in the build stage of Gen AI, which means we need enormous amounts of compute power. And as each LLM evolves, each OpenAI LLM, each vendor, as their proprietary LLM evolves and gets more sophisticated, it requires more compute power to train the successive LLM. So at what point do investors grow weary of writing checks and want to see some ROI? Right. So clearly there's ROI at the build stage. You've got the chip companies selling chips to the LLM companies. So right now that's primarily NVIDIA, who's reaping most of the revenue in the space. And they're selling to OpenAI, Google, AWS, and anybody and everybody who wants to build an LLM. Then you've got the LLM guys powering up the cloud server company. So OpenAI selling its wares to Microsoft. And some of the LLM companies, frankly, are building out, such as Grok, their own cloud capability. Right. So the remote server guys, the cloud guys, they're buying LLMs. Okay. So now what about end users? Where do they factor in? So I'll give you one example. At the application layer, so chip company sells to the LLM, LLM sells to the cloud guy. At the application layer, I'll offer you the example of Adobe, right? So Adobe incorporates Azure, powered by OpenAI, into its products, and it really hasn't seen revenue lift. Right, so meaning end user attach rates for Gen AI, talking about Adobe now, really hasn't materialized in revenue lift. So when does revenue start to be a factor? I could see OpenAI's Sora product go direct to end users. I mean, I could see end users deploying that to create user-generated content, YouTube stuff, low-budget animation movies, things like this. I think the output would still have to be dropped into Adobe to be polished. I just don't know what that means for revenue, right? Because it's kind of in the vein of a Facebook. We're talking about user-generated content here. And I'm asking the question more about commercial end user use cases. When will those start to materialize? I haven't heard of any meaningful attach rates with Gen AI yet. Microsoft Copilot, got Azure AI, supposedly has 53,000 users. Who's actually using it? What's the engagement level like at the end user level? I think Microsoft, my suspicion, I feel like they have jacked up prices. That's a fact. That's not my feeling. That's public information. Their price increases across the globe. So I feel as though Microsoft has leveraged its price increases to help with the AI narrative on the earnings calls. I feel like Satya Nadella goes out there, talks to investors, says, look, we're getting lots of interest. Everybody's interested in Gen AI. Everybody's using our stuff. Just look at our revenue. a bunch of that revenue growth is pricing power. That's where the revenue lift is coming from, price increases, not Gen AI. So, how much longer will this LLM build continue? Especially given that it's going to require increasing amounts of compute. So how much longer will it continue before investors start to put on the brakes and say, I want to see end user revenue so that I know there's pull-through demand before I write another check. That's all for now. See you next time.